Queen Elizabeth's life was one of duty and great commitment. From the moment she became queen at the age of 25 to her passing in 2022, she was the pillar of continuity and stability for the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. However, her daughter Princess Anne has revealed the truth of the final chapter of Queen Elizabeth's life. Her words provide a more personal glimpse into the Queen's humanity and the difficulties of her last days. Let's begin with the history of Queen Elizabeth's life. Born in 1926, Elizabeth Alexander Mary Windsor grew up as the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York, who later became King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. The young Elizabeth had a relatively peaceful childhood. However, in 1936, her life changed forever when her uncle, King Edward VII, abdicated, making her father king and placing Elizabeth next in line to the throne. As a child, Elizabeth least expected that she would one day be queen. But by the time she was 10 years old, the weight of monarchy was thrust upon her. The Second World War brought a new sense of responsibility for the young princess. And during the war, she became active in volunteering for the Auxiliary Territorial Service, where she trained as a driver and mechanic. It was during this time that Elizabeth began to realize her duty to her country, and her reign reflected this lifelong commitment. At the age of 21, Elizabeth married Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, and together they had 4 children: Charles, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. Elizabeth's reign formally began on February 6, 1952, after the unexpected death of her father, George VI. She ascended to the throne while on a royal tour of Kenya with Prince Philip. The news of her father's death marked the beginning of a reign that would last for 7 decades, one of the longest reigns in history. Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth was often viewed as the embodiment of grace and dedication. Her sense of duty was unwavering, and she carried the weight of the monarchy with a quiet strength. Whether it was dealing with the political tensions of the Cold War, the challenges of modernizing the monarchy, or the pressures of personal tragedy within her family, Elizabeth II managed to maintain a calm and composed presence. Her long reign represented steady leadership, and as the years went by, she became not just a monarch but a symbol of continuity for the United Kingdom and beyond. Despite her public persona as a figurehead of duty, behind closed doors, Queen Elizabeth was first and foremost a mother, a wife, and a grandmother. Her relationship with her children, particularly her only daughter Anne, was one of mutual respect and understanding. Princess Anne, who is known for her practical nature and no-nonsense attitude, grew up under the watchful eyes of her parents, but her relationship with her mother was particularly special. Queen Elizabeth's devotion to her children was evident, despite the immense pressure that came with being a monarch. As the years passed, Queen Elizabeth's health began to decline. She remained active and committed to her role, but the signs of aging became more obvious. Yet, even in her final years, she continued to fulfill her royal duties with the same dedication that defined her entire reign. In the months leading up to her death, the Queen, despite her frailty, continued to meet with government officials, review state documents, and perform ceremonial duties. The iconic red box, which contained important papers that required her attention, still arrived at her bedside every morning. It was during this time, in her final days, that Princess Anne revealed a deeply personal moment between her and her mother. According to Anne, the Queen expressed concerns about her passing, particularly about the potential complications of dying in Scotland, where she had chosen to spend her final days at Balmoral Castle. The Queen had always cherished Balmoral as a retreat, a place where she could escape the pressures of royal life and connect with nature. The grounds, the beauty of the Scottish Highlands, and the tranquility of the estate made it a special place for the Queen and her family. As her health declined, the Queen worried about the logistical challenges her death would cause. She confided in Princess Anne, saying, "It would be more trouble for everyone if I died in Scotland." The Queen's concern wasn't about her own death, but about the burden it might place on her family, her staff, and the nation. Even in her final moments, she was still thinking about the well-being of others. In response, Princess Anne, who had always been a source of support for her mother, reassured her with simple but heartfelt words. "Just do what you want to do. It's fine." These words were not just an act of reassurance. They were a final act of love, allowing her mother to let go of the weight of her royal responsibilities and focus on her own peace. Queen Elizabeth's decision to remain at Balmoral, despite her concerns, was a deeply personal one. It was a reflection of the place she loved most, a place that represented peace and family. Balmoral had been the place for many happy memories throughout her life. It was where she had spent time with her children, teaching them to appreciate nature and the outdoors. a place where she could connect with her family away from the world's eyes. Following her death on September 8, 2022, the world mourned the loss of a queen who had become the icon of duty, strength, and grace. Operation Unicorn, a contingency plan for the death of a monarch in Scotland, was swiftly enacted. Her body was transported to Edinburgh, where she lay in state, allowing the people of Scotland to pay their respects before she was taken to London for a state funeral. Despite the complexity of the logistics for the Queen's passing, they were handled with the same precision and professionalism that was evident in her reign. While reflecting on his mother's final decision to spend her last days at Balmoral, King Charles III spoke with deep affection. "My late mother especially treasured the time spent at Balmoral, and it was there, in the most beloved of places, where she chose to spend her final moments." Princess Anne's revelation about her mother's final wishes offers us a glimpse into the personal side of a monarch who spent much of her life devoted to the public. Anne's simple words of reassurance allowed her mother the peace to choose what mattered most to her in the end: Balmoral, her family, and the quiet beauty of a life well lived. In her final days, Queen Elizabeth showed the world that she wasn't just a monarch. She was a mother, a grandmother, and a woman who, despite the great responsibilities that defined her life, still carried the burden of care for others even in her passing. Her final wish was a reflection of her humanity and the quiet strength she was renowned for. What do you think this says about a life lived for others when, even in the end, Queen Elizabeth put their well-being above her own? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Those who worked closely with her during her time at Balmoral often spoke of her humility. She would personally lay the table for picnics, wash dishes, and insist on doing things herself. It was these small acts of normalcy that endeared her to her staff and showed a side of her that the public never saw. This connection to nature and the unpretentious acts of daily life probably influenced her decision to remain in Balmoral during her final days. To the Queen, Balmoral was a place where she felt most human. Queen Elizabeth also made time to reflect on the institution she had dedicated her life to preserving. According to close confidants, she expressed quiet hopes for the monarchy's future. She wished it would remain a source of unity, yet adaptable enough to thrive in an ever-changing world. The Queen understood better than anyone that tradition alone could not sustain the monarchy. Her reign had already seen moments of reinvention, from embracing public television broadcasts of royal ceremonies to allowing candid documentaries that demystified the royal family. But in her last days, her focus shifted from what the monarchy was to what it could become: